was grabbed from the embassy by British police. He said something along the lines of this will define Britain's attitude to the free press for generations, and it's true. I mean, that image will live in infamy. So we need to make sure Britain does not become a party to what would be one of the biggest nails in the coffin of the free press that the world has ever seen, maybe the biggest nail in the coffin. So, and for all the people that are watching who live in Britain, you live in the most important jurisdiction for any kind of activism on this topic, because if he goes to the US, he's got no chance. The real chance he has to avoid and his life be saved and avoid extradition is in the UK. So we really need to focus efforts in the run up to September to expose the irregularities, to expose the bias, and try and get justice.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We're discussing here whether Assange or someone else has done something wrong or not. But what about the war crimes? We are living in a time when our own war crimes are no longer prosecuted. We know that we have conducted aggressive wars. We've hanged people on Nuremberg for this. 175 years for whatever we're accusing Mr. Assange of. It certainly is not violence, certainly is not genocide, certainly is not massacring civilians or torturing anybody. And people for genocide in The Hague, they received 35 or 45 years.
Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange!
You've been listening to
Free Assange
Radio!
This is Radio Free Assange.
Basically, I think that Julian Assange is he's a very brave guy. He's a fantastic journalist. He's one of the sort of he's basically being put in prison because he's too good. That's the problem. He's the promise of a free media, which we haven't really had before. We've just had propaganda, and I think that's basically why these sort of powerful states such as Britain and the US can't live with him.
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm quite proud of that. We have built a really grand project, in some ways a grand dream, to create a rebel library of Alexandria.
Hands up, Assange!
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm quite proud of that. We have built a really grand project, in some ways a grand dream, to create a rebel library of Alexandria.
This is Radio Free Assange.
And we demand free Julian Assange! 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 No extradition! We want the censor!
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free Julian Assange! No extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange. Journalism is not a crime. Free Julian Assange.
No extradition!
You are listening to
The best news of all is that courage is contagious. We have this myth sometimes, this myth that the future is something that is fixed, static, out there, waiting to happen to us. But the future doesn't happen to us. It's not fixed. It's not out there. The future is created by us, by the aggregation of the millions of choices each of us makes every day. And so I want to leave you with two questions. Number one, what is the future that we want to create? And number two, do we have the courage to create it?
You are listening to Radio Free Assange. Journalism is no crime. Jail the war criminals. Free Julian Assange.
In democracies, wars are a result of lies. And why one might think that that should lead us to a state of despair, it should lead us also to an optimistic understanding. Because if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. No extradition, it's only one decision. No extradition, it's only one decision. No extradition, it's only one decision. No extradition.
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm Julian Assange.
Roger, I'll get you into space.
Editor of WikiLeaks. We've exposed the world's secrets.
These documents belong to the United States government.
Been attacked by the powerful.
The United States strongly condemns.
Hey, quit asking questions. He broke the law.
illegally shoot the son of a...
Today, we're on a quest for revolutionary ideas that can change the world tomorrow.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We are now approaching the state of Orwell's dictum. Perfect dictum, that he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls internet servers controls the intellectual record of mankind, and by controlling that, controls our perceptions of who we are, and by controlling that, controls what laws and regulations we make in society.
This is Radio Free Assange.
They are about to take every right away from you. You will not be able to fight for any other cause. We are talking about the fundamentals here. We must fight against the extradition. We must save Julian Assange.
Every single, all the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world dedicating significant resources over the past 10 years to destroying his reputation. So it's at a stage now where it's actually you risk something to even defend him. So the facts are very hard to get out. But when you start looking into it, you see that actually this is not a fair trial at all. And from start to finish, it's been irregular, and it's actually a real stain on the British state and the.
John, what happened today?
Well, continuing the accusations against Julian.
Come a little bit closer.
Continuing the accusations against Julian about redactions. At the end of the indictment from Kronberg, from the United States, it mentions that people disappeared as an accusation against Julian and WikiLeaks about redactions. I'd like to outline to you clearly the disappearances in Iraq. There was, in 2006, a cable was released which documents a disappearance. An entire family in their home were murdered. The mother, the father, uncles, aunties, grandparents, all of them slaughtered. The United States soldiers, in order to obliterate this crime scene, called in the aircraft. And the aircraft blew up the house and the remains of the children and mothers and fathers. That is, they disappeared off the face of the earth, an entire family. That's the cause of the disappearances, the United States slaughter of that family. Also, I'd like to mention, while mentioning that there are 1 million dead in Iraq and 38 million people displaced right across the Middle East. They're the disappearances, and that's the crime. What we're seeing here today is people trying to cover crimes against humanity and war crimes, a list longer than you can possibly contemplate without tears. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
I was going to ask you another question, but I think you did so well.
I'm just fixing things up about those accusations.
That's great. That's really nice.
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm quite proud of that. That's we have built a really grand project. In some ways, a grand dream to create a rebel library of Alexandria.
Hands up, Assange!
This is Radio Free Assange.
And we demand free Julian Assange! 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 No extradition! He won the censorship!
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free Julian Assange! No extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange. Journalism is not a crime. Free Julian Assange.
No extradition!
You are listening to Radio.
The best news of all is that courage is contagious. We have this myth sometimes, this myth that the future is something that is fixed, static, out there, waiting to happen to us. But the future doesn't happen to us. It's not fixed. It's not out there. The future is created by us, by the aggregation of the millions of choices each of us makes every day. And so I want to leave you with two questions. Number one, what is the future that we want to create? And number two, do we have the courage to create it?
You are listening to Radio Free Assange. Journalism is no crime. Jail the war criminals. Free Julian Assange.
What was your experience today?
So today I monitored the afternoon session, so I caught Mr. Schenkman's testimony, which was quite strong. It is worth noting that there were technical difficulties again, and what the solution ended up being was him holding his phone to his ear for the duration of his testimony. But regardless, he remained good-natured about it and engaged quite robustly in the questioning. He was really trying to establish that the Espionage Act has been used politically in this case, that experts, including himself, are shocked by the extent to which this indictment has gone. However, the prosecution was trying to lead him down other paths, and it was quite, I have to say, an entertaining line of questioning. And at the end, the judge decided to leave it for the day because another hour is needed with the prosecution tomorrow and half an hour probably with the defense afterwards. So they will return to his testimony tomorrow afternoon. Access issues continue. I want to note at one point this afternoon there was one journalist and one political observer in the overflow courtroom. So So this is a court that apparently has no space for NGOs such as ourselves who have been barred official access, and Amnesty International and others as well told that they cannot be allocated those seats. These seats are empty. It was a sea of empty chairs. So we continue to get in when we can to the public gallery, but access issues do remain a broader issue and the court should reconsider. So we will stick with this case and continue to campaign for Julian Assange's release.
Could you speak briefly about the space reserved for VIPs and implications for access for others?
Oh, absolutely. So the VIP issue continues, which seems ludicrous because first of all, it's apparently not normal practices at this court to reserve specific spaces in the public gallery for anyone. We don't know who these people are, but the court officials have made it clear that they do have a list. They know who these people are. So each session, 3 seats are held back until an arbitrary point at which they then allow others into the public gallery. But the thing is, even if there are VIPs, there are clearly other seats that could be allocated to them without taking up valuable space in the public gallery. It cannot be understated how important this case is internationally, how overwhelmingly in the public interest it is, and the public has a right to witness these proceedings. This is not open justice if hardly anybody is able to bear witness. And again, because the court is refusing to recognize and accommodate NGO observers as such, we are also competing then for these very few spaces in the public gallery. So when you look at, each session, 3 seats sitting empty needlessly until some arbitrary point, it's really maddening because we've now been here a full 8 days and have yet to see these 3 VIPs, whoever they may be.
What do you make of the line of questioning of the defense this afternoon? It seemed like endless going back and forth of hypotheticals, and even the judge intervened a couple of times asking where they were going with this.
Oh, so the prosecution, yes. So the judge, that was the most I've seen her yet push back a bit on the prosecution, although I haven't been in for every moment of these proceedings. The prosecution seemed to be leading to a point that we don't quite know yet where they were going. And in fact, at the very end, she complained to the judge that, or started to complain that the witness was taking a long time in giving his responses, but the judge shut down that argument and said basically that the prosecution had taken quite a slow approach in building up their own case. So we'll see what happens in the second half tomorrow. But yes, it did focus on hypotheticals. I thought Mr. Schenkman actually responded very well, and his expertise in this matter was very clear, and he was very professional and good-natured despite this line of questioning and despite the technical difficulties as well. The prosecution in part seemed to be trying to get him to say that all of these matters of judicial interpretation mean that this should be a matter heard in the United States. But he pushed back very hard when that was suggested, I believe twice, and referred again to his belief that political offence is a bar to extraditions from the UK, and that this is a political case. He believes that this is a political application of the Espionage Act. So he stood his ground on that point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm quite proud of that. That's we have built a really grand project. In some ways, a grand dream to create a rebel library of Alexandria.
Hands up, Assange!
This is Radio Free Assange.
And we demand free Julian Assange! 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 No extradition! He wants extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free Julian Assange! No extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange. Journalism is not a crime. Free Julian Assange.
No extradition!
You are listening to
The best news of all is that courage is contagious. We have this myth sometimes, this myth that the future is something that is fixed, static, out there, waiting to happen to us. But the future doesn't happen to us. It's not fixed. It's not out there. The future is created by us, by the aggregation of the millions of choices each of us makes every day. And so I want to leave you with two questions. Number one, what is the future that we want to create? And number two, do we have the courage to create it?
You are listening to Radio Free Assange. Journalism is no crime. Jail the war criminals. Free Julian Assange.
Today, Julian Assange was meant to be in court this last Monday for a procedural hearing.
Witnesses being at the court, being their things. The first one was Mr. Sloboda. We had some technical issues again, but honestly I'm still processing like the second part of the hearing, where we heard Mr. Schenkman, who is an attorney and an expert in constitutional law, and he was he handed in a written statement about the historical context of the Espionage Act and how it was created in the era of World War I, and how this was like a difficult political time. So I only had to go over the statement, and then the prosecution started asking questions about it, but rarely mentioned anything concerning the Espionage Act or the historical context. Covering the hearing on Twitter in German, and I usually try to not make any comments on what I think about what is happening. I'm trying more to be neutrally report what I see, but today I could not resist the urge to express my feeling that we are getting carried away quite a bit, and we're talking about a lot of things, but not the thing he was giving a statement about. Right at the moment I tweeted this, he actually also mentioned that he thinks that his time and the court's time is quite precious, and if they maybe not rather talk about the things he's actually giving testimony about. And things quite escalated a bit at the end. The prosecution lawyer complained to the judge about how the witness is not precisely answering her questions, and the judge, first time I saw that in this case, basically told her that they'd better not have this discussion now, because she chose to go this path and now has to take the consequences. Before saying that, she actually said that she now has to choose her words carefully, because she felt it looked like she was a bit angry about her actually daring to criticize the witness for not precisely answering, because she asked very complicated questions, read statements, very long statements, and then basically asked him what he thinks about it. She asked him about statements made by others. His former boss, he was working as a young lawyer for a very popular American constitutional lawyer, and she quoted him and asked him what he thinks about it, and he just said I can't comment on his quotes, and he unfortunately also can't comment on it because he died in 2016. So it was a bit of a weird part, but we're continuing tomorrow. It was interesting, especially I hope that we can hear more about the historical context of the Espionage Act, but yes, it was an intense day.
Thank you very much.
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm quite proud of that. We have built a really grand project, in some ways a grand dream, to create a rebel library of Alexandria.
Hands up, Assange!
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm quite proud of that. We have built a really grand project, in some ways a grand dream, to create a rebel library of Alexandria.
Hands up, Assange!
This is Radio Free Assange.
I'm quite proud of that. That's we have built a really.
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free demand! Free Julian Assange! 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 No extradition! He won the censor!
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free Julian Assange! No extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange. Journalism is not a crime. Free Julian Assange.
No extradition!
You are listening to Radio.
The best news of all is that courage is contagious. We have this myth sometimes, this myth that the future is something that is fixed, static, out there, waiting to happen to us. But the future doesn't happen to us. It's not fixed. It's not out there. The future is created by us, by the aggregation of the millions of choices each of us makes every day. And so I want to leave you